Good evening, dear viewers. This is the game 7 Day to Die, and I'm Alex Cheshire Game. Propose to start today and tomorrow to a story about the deep sea oil workers, then when I get back to my regular schedule in a couple of days. Continue with the facts about Fun Pimps and finish deep in knowledge about the game. A story about deep sea oil workers of 7 Day to Die. The second generation of oil workers on the offshore drilling platform had always heard stories of their predecessors' impressive feats of self-sufficiency. They were a tight-knit community of highly skilled workers who had managed to turn the isolated platform into a thriving hub of innovation and efficiency. Thanks to the intelligent use of science and technology, the oil workers had managed to survive and thrive in the harsh conditions of the deep sea. They had developed advanced filtration systems that allowed them to turn seawater into fresh water, and had even set up a small hydroponic garden to grow vegetables and herbs. Their drilling platform had become a beacon of hope in the midst of the apocalypse that had ravaged the world. While the rest of humanity struggled to survive, the oil workers were living comfortably and securely, thanks to their ingenuity resourcefulness. It wasn't easy, of course. Living and working on a drilling platform in the middle of the ocean was never going to be a walk in the park. But the oil workers had learned to make the best of the situation, turning their isolation into a strength rather than a weakness. The second generation of oil workers had inherited this legacy of innovation and problem solving. They were proud of their forefathers' achievements, but also eager to push the limits of what was possible. They spent their days tinkering with machines and experimenting with new ideas, always striving to find better, more efficient ways of doing things. And despite the dangers of their professions, they had never lost a single person in 5 years. They took pride in their safety protocols and the rigorous training they received, knowing that each member of their community was vital to their continued survival. All in all, life on the drilling platform was challenging, but rewarding. The oil workers had managed to create a community that was more than just a workplace. It was a home, a refuge, and the symbol of hope of a world that desperately needed it. As the oil workers continued to drill deeper and deeper into the sea, they made a startling discovery. There was another civilization living underwater. At first, they thought they were hallucinating or imagining things, but the evidence was undeniable. The workers had drilled into a cave system that led to a hidden underwater world. The workers were stunned by what they found. The underwater civilization was unlike anything they had ever seen. The people living there were humanoid, but their bodies had adapted to their underwater environment. They had gills instead of lungs and webbed fingers and toes for better swimming. The oil workers were initially wary of the underwater civilization, but soon they realized that these people posed no threat. In fact, they were fascinated by the oil workers and their technology. The two groups quickly formed a bond, sharing knowledge and resources. As time passed, the oil workers began to notice changes in themselves. They were spending more and more time underwater, and their bodies were adapting to their environment. Their skin was becoming smoother, their eyes were growing larger, and they were developing the ability to breathe underwater. Slowly but surely, the oil workers were changing. They were becoming more like the underwater civilization, and less like the humans they once were. But they didn't mind. They had found a new home, a new family, and a new way of life. Over thousands of years, the oil workers and the underwater civilization had merged into a single community. They had developed new technology that allowed them to thrive in the depths of the sea, and they had become guardians of the underwater world. And so, the oil workers who once worked on a drilling platform in the middle of the ocean were not something entirely different. They were a new species, born out of the unlikely meeting of two civilizations. But they never forgot their roots, or the ingenuity and resilience that had allowed them to survive in the first place. As the oil workers and the underwater civilization merged into a single community, they continued to thrive in their underwater world. They learned more and more about their environment and developed new technology to help them live in this unique habitat. However, one day a group of scientists made a grave mistake. They were attempting to develop a new form of energy. But instead, they created a virus that turned people into zombies. The virus quickly spread throughout the underwater community, infecting many of its inhabitants. The oil workers and the underwater civilization were forced to abandon their underwater world and move to land. They had prepared for this eventuality and had developed advanced technology that allowed them to live on the surface. However, they quickly realized that the land was no longer safe. The zombie virus had spread throughout the world, and those who had not been infected had evolved into intelligent, aggressive zombies. The oil workers and the underwater civilization found themselves in a world that was even more dangerous than the one they had left behind. The two communities banded together, using their combined knowledge and resources to survive in this new world. They built fortified structures and developed new weapons to protect themselves from the hordes of zombies that roamed the land. But the problems of the zombies virus remained unresolved. The oil workers and the underwater civilization knew that they could not stay on land forever, as the virus was still active in the ocean. They worked tirelessly to find a cure for the virus, but their efforts were in vain. Despite the challenges they faced, the oil workers and the underwater civilization refused to give up. They continued to push the limits of their technology. Despite their best efforts, the oil workers and the underwater civilization were unable to find a cure for the zombie virus that had forced them to leave their underwater world. However, they continued to work on developing new technology, hoping to find a solution that would allow them to return home. One day, they made a breakthrough. They discovered a way to open a portal to alternative realities, which they believed held the key to their salvation. They were excited and hopeful, but also cautious, knowing that the portal was untested and could be dangerous. The oil workers and the underwater civilization gathered together and prepared to open the portal. As they activated the technology, they felt a surge of energy. and the portal began to glow. However, something went wrong, and they saw a horde of united underwater and surface zombies emerge from the portal. The oil workers and the underwater civilization were stunned. They had never seen anything like this before. The zombies were stronger, faster, and more intelligent than any they had encountered before. As the oil workers and the underwater civilization realized that the zombie threat was too great to overcome on land, they knew they had to come up with a new plan. They couldn't stay on the surface forever, and their attempts to find a cure for the zombie virus had failed. They needed a new home, a new place to live where they could be safe from the zombie threat. And so they turned to the sky. The oil workers and the underwater civilization began building flying cities, massive structures that could float in the sky and provide a safe haven for their people. They used their advanced technology to create self-sustaining ecosystems, using solar power and hydroponic gardens to provide food and energy. The flying cities quickly became a symbol of hope for the people of the world. They were a beacon of innovation and progress, a testament to what humanity could achieve even in the face of adversity. But the oil workers and the underwater civilization knew that they couldn't rely on the flying cities forever. They needed a more permanent solution, a way to escape the zombie threat once and for all. And so, they began building a drifting space fleet, a massive fleet of ships that would allow them to leave the planet and explore the mysteries of the universe. It was a daunting task, but the oil workers and underwater civilization were determined to success. They worked tirelessly, day and night, to build the ships that would one day carry them to the stars. And now, as the space fleet began to take shape, the oil workers and the underwater civilization look to the future with hope and excitement. They know that they have a long way to go, and that the challenges they face are immense. But they also know that with their ingenuity and resourcefulness, there is nothing they can't accomplish. In the end, the oil workers and the underwater civilization had turned to the sky and the stars, seeking a new home, a new future, and they had done it all through the power of science and technology, providing once again that anything is possible when humanity comes together to achieve a common goal. So this is all for now. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.